Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Mukesh's Tech Space. I post video tutorials on easy ways to set up and use AWS Lightsail, Azure, and other web hosting tools and services, as well as WordPress tips and tricks. So if you're interested in this type of content and in these topics, please consider subscribing. In this video, I wanted to share with you a new server and web host management tool. Early on in this channel, I created 2 videos on this topic. I have a video that walks you through the setup of AWS Lightsail and ServerPilot. And then later on, I also created a video on AWS Lightsail and RunCloud setup. And both of these, ServerPilot and RunCloud, are third-party cloud-based web hosting and web host management services. And once Lightsail, AWS Lightsail introduced the option to create servers and instances using Plesk hosting services, I created a video tutorial on how to set up a Plesk server. In this video, we'll take a look at setting up a web host management software called CapRover. I recently ran into this tool and found it very easy to use and simple to manage. While other services I just talked about are cloud-based options, they have a paid option as well as limited free tier options. This is completely open source and there is no cost to set this up and use this other than the cost of your AWS Lightsail instance. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, the first thing we're going to do is create our brand new instance. So from our Lightsail dashboard, create an instance, select Linux, Unix, and then we'll select OS only, and then we'll pick Ubuntu 16.04 LTS, which is what Docker as well as the CapRover software supports. And then over here, now the minimum server requirements for CapRover will be to use a 1 gig RAM based server. Based on how you intend to use the server, you may want to go from 1 gig to 2 gig or 4 gigs based on your needs. But for our demo purposes, I'll go with the bare minimum, which is 1 gig. Go ahead and create the instance. Then as the instance is coming up, what we'll do next is create a static IP address and associate that static IP address to the server, and then we'll open up a couple of firewall ports. Okay, we have our server up and running. Then let's go over to networking and let's create a static IP address. There we go. So here we have our IP address. So the next thing, what we want to do is set up our domain name that we'll use for this server. So go into your DNS management section of your registrar or wherever you intend you're hosting your domain name, go into the DNS management portion of it. And we will be creating an A record inside there. So for me, I'm going to use mukesh.digital. So here we'll type *.myserver. And we'll leave it at that. So asterisk would basically allow it to create any subdomains underneath this main domain. And any new apps that you create, you'll want to be able to have the server automatically create those subdomains for you. So that's why you want to use asterisk. And then my server is the name of the server. And then dot, or just leave that here for myself. And then we'll do the IP address and add a record. Okay, so once it's done, you should have something similar to this, where this is your IP address, and then this is the subdomains that we want to have set up. Now come back to Lightsail. The next thing we're going to do is open up some firewall ports. So we already have by default port 22 and port 80 open. we'll add another one. And for CapRover, we want to open up firewall port 3000. And we should also open up HTTPS 443. Perfect. So the next step is to begin our setup and installation of the software. So open up SSH, and inside the terminal window, sudo.su, so you're logging in as root. Most of these commands that you're going to run after this requires elevated privileges, so you want to log in as root. And then the first thing that we need to do is install Docker. This software is based off of the Docker platform, and so we'll need to have Docker installed so that it can do its thing basically. So first one is app-get update, and don't worry, you don't have to write these scripts, these commands down. I will have these commands in a script and a link down in the description below. And then next we need to install a few software packages. So I'm just going to copy and paste the commands. And this will install things like curl, and a transport layer that Docker requires, as well as ability to generate certificates, so CA certificates as well. So once that's done, the next command to run is a curl command. Okay. Then the next command to run is to verify fingerprints. Again, another item that Docker requires. All right. And then the next command is to add the Docker installation repositories to our server. Then do apt-get update. And then finally, this command here will install Docker on this server. There we go. And that'll take a few minutes. And once that's done, let's verify with this following command that our Docker installation was successful. And right here, hello from Docker. This message shows that your installation appears to be working correctly. So I think we're in good shape so far. Now the next set of commands will be to start setting up an installation of CapRover, the host management software. So the first thing that they want us to do is configure the software-based firewalls for the ports that the server requires to run. So we'll paste that. And then finally the Docker command to install the software. And again, this will take a few minutes. Okay, so now we have the initial installation of CapRover completed. Now we'll do couple of more commands to set up the environment. So these next commands we're going to run from our own local machine. We'll need to have Node.js and npm installed on our local machine that we'll use to install the CapRover command line interface, and then from there there are a couple of setup items to finish off for the complete installation. So if you're on Windows, you can just open up PowerShell. I already have Node and npm installed. If not, you can go ahead and, if you don't have that installed, go ahead and install Node and npm. The first thing we'll do, you would just run npm install -g CapRover. And I already have it installed, so it may complain that that system's already installed or that module's already installed on my computer. Okay, and then once that's done, the command to run next is CapRover server setup, and then on this prompt select yes. Now it needs the IP address of our server, so let's grab that. There we go. And then the server root domain. And that will be this portion right here, starting with myserver.mukesh.digital. And then the password. So this is the admin password for the entire server. Enter it again. And then it needs a valid email address for setting up Let's Encrypt SSO certificates. So go ahead and give it a valid email address. And then finally, this is the machine name. I could just leave it as default, Captain-03. And with that, it should be complete. Now we can go to our URL here and see that it's running. So open a new tab, type in captain.myserver.mukesh.digital. That should bring me to the login page. If we log in, there we go, and this is all configured. Now we want to click on apps, and then from here you can set up any number of apps using their one-click repository. So if I click on this, I'll show you here, you can install any number of these applications, and we'll walk through a couple of installations here, part of our video tutorial. But the ones that are interesting here are, for at least for our purpose here, is MySQL. So we'll set up MySQL database, and then following that we'll set up the WordPress installations. And that's the way I'll show you how to set up those quickly for any future development work that you'll want to do. You can use this process to set up new sites with WordPress. They do support a lot of other software here that if you're interested in, or if those are the ones that you need, you can set those up as well. If the packages are not listed here, you can actually pick up any official Docker package or Docker image and use that to install, use that Docker file to install those apps on your server as well. There is pretty good documentation that CapRover has provided, so I'll link that down in the description below. And I may do a new future video to show you how to install applications that are not in their one-click apps repository. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is install a MySQL database. So we'll come down here, click on MySQL, and then give it a database name. We could just say MyDB, and then give it a root password. Okay, well, we have our database up and running. Next, we'll install PHP MyAdmin, which is a database management tool, and that is available through their one-click repository here. That is available. Let's see, where'd it go? There we are, PHP MyAdmin. We'll just give it a name, and then leave these default, and then hit deploy. And this is how easy it is, folks. I mean, pretty much if the application that you need is within their one-click repository, you're clicking on it, a few configuration parameters, and it's up and running. And that's why I found this very useful, especially if I'm doing WordPress development, or if I'm doing any client work on WordPress. I can quickly have the server spin up WordPress sites, development sites that I can start working on, rather than trying to spin up brand new servers. You can use one Lightsail server to do this work. Okay, so we have our MySQL database, we have PHP MyAdmin. The next thing we'll do before setting up the WordPress site is create our database for WordPress. So click on PHP MyAdmin. You can just basically go to open in browser. I was already signed in, so let me start over and show you how that screen looks. So you'll come to, when you click on PHP MyAdmin from here, you'll come to this screen. Put your server name. Remember, it can't be localhost or any other URL. It has to be the srv-captain -- and then your database instance name. Then your root, give it your root password that you set up for MySQL. And we are in here. Go ahead and let's create a new database as well as a new user that will access that database. So we will create our new user first. Okay, click on user accounts, add a user account, and we'll give this a name. Test WP user password. Here we go. And then we'll create a database with the same name and then grant all privileges. That's the easiest way. So in that case, I will take this word user out and then hit go. Here we go. Here's our database ready to be used. So come back here. Let's click on one-click database and come down to WordPress. Test WP. Again, our server. So this would be mydb-db. Database name. So that's the one that we just created, which is test WP. And then we could say this as the test WP. WordPress user was test WP as well, and then the password. And then hit deploy. And this will take a few seconds. Here we go. So once the test site was up and running, I just clicked on open a new browser. That brings up our WordPress installation screens. So we could say here test WP, admin user account. So we'll say admin, and a password. Give it our email. And install WordPress. So now if we come here Our database has tables, and we can log in. So here we go. Now if you wanted to install a second WordPress site to work on, you would just come back to your CapRover dashboard. So you come to your dashboard and click on the one-click apps, then search for WordPress as well. Now I don't know if I've explained why there are two WordPress options here. This option right here, WordPress, what this will do is install WordPress as well as create your database instance as well, MySQL database instance. The second option here, which is what we picked to install WordPress in the beginning, was WordPress with no database, because we already had set up a database ahead of time. I'd like to do it that way because I can have just one database instance and install multiple applications using that one database instance. But you could use this option if you just did not want to worry about it and wanted to create multiple database instances. And it all depends on how strong your server is as well. So again, we'll click on WordPress with no database, and then we can say test WP2. This will be our second site. Give it the srv-captain-mydb, which is our database server location, and then give the database name. Now I don't think I set up my second database, so what we could do is use the same database but give it a different prefix for our tables. That way we could just use one database and then have multiple WordPress sites within the same MySQL database. So we'll just use test WP, and then here we'll just use test WP2 as a prefix. And the WordPress user, and then the database user, test WP, password for your database user, and then hit deploy. So now we're setting up our second WordPress site using the same database instance. So if you look over to our PHP MyAdmin and refresh, oh, that's right, it won't create it until we finish the WordPress installation. So let's go back to our apps dashboard, and our second WordPress site is right here. Click on the link there and the installation. So we could go ahead and start the installation. Give it the email and then install WordPress. Now if we go look at PHP MyAdmin in our database, we should see the test WP2 based WordPress tables. And if we log in, we're here. So in this way we were able to create two WordPress instances, one SQL database, and all of it can be managed through this CapRover system. Now let me quickly show you inside each of these application configurations. You have several ways to configure your website further. So first is to enable HTTPS, and when clicking on this, it will generate a Let's Encrypt certificate and install that for your site automatically. So it's really just a one-click item. And you can also, by default, check this option, which will set up the proper configuration to redirect all HTTP traffic to HTTPS. We'll hit save. And then finally, if you are using this solution for your production sites, or if you have a different domain that you want to eventually point to your WordPress site, you can set that up here. You can connect another domain to the same WordPress instance. Instead of using this long domain that we had set up just for our CapRover solution, you can have, I could eventually have mukesh.digital only, or www.mukesh.digital point to this WordPress site. So those are the various application configurations. You can here also delete the app if you don't need it anymore. And there are several other configuration options here that I have not played around with or gone deeper into. So if I learn more about this that makes sense for another video, I will do that. But really quick, I think that was it. I just wanted to show you how to use this, I guess, fourth option in our series to be able to set up multiple WordPress sites or multiple applications on one Lightsail instance using a pretty simple, easy to use management interface. The first one being ServerPilot I did, RunCloud, then we also did Plesk, and then this is your fourth option. So you have pretty variety of options to choose from if you want to set up your own server and be able to manage your server in a easy fashion. So I hope you found this video useful. Like I said, I may make some future videos on the same platform to walk through some of the advanced features or some of the other options that this solution may provide. So look out for that. If you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and subscribe if you like this type of content and just help me reach my 1,000 subscriber mark. As well as if you like this video and you found it useful, like it, as well as share it with others that may find it useful as well. So until the next video, take care.